This conference will now be recorded.
So we'll call to order the Monterey Select Board, November 9th at 12:02 PM. For a regular weekly meeting at noon. The first item on our agenda is meeting with Sophia, the Human Resources Director. We're actually in her office space. Thank you for joining us, and I should also note that all three select board members are present here in town. So I know we have a couple specific items to deal with Sophia, and then also just a general update. I know we're meeting every month. Is there any particular order you want to proceed in? Otherwise, I will.
Why don't you begin?
Okay, so you're going through the whole handbook, the whole employee handbook. And you are aware, because we worked on it with you, that we recently approved the anti-discrimination and harassment policy because we wanted to fast track that through, but that will ultimately be part of the handbook, right? So do you wanna give us any updates on the handbook or any questions that you have that we could answer, or?
I think the biggest things that are open right now, you already have, like the vacation and things like that are more like what the town wants to do rather than like what the law is saying. So for right now, I'm set with that.
That was part-time vacation, right?
Yeah, it was kind of just the general decision of
Okay.
what you all wanted to do with that. What I'm doing right now is organizing policies, so I might be extending some, maybe rewording a few if necessary, but mostly I won't be touching a lot. I'll just be organizing the handbook in a more like easy to follow fashion by adding like a table of contents and things like that. I just need a little more time on it because there have been things that have been coming up. But no, I don't feel as though I have anything to like ask you all directly. If things do come up though, I'll just send an email. Or whatever is preferred at the time.
We couldn't address the part-time vacation policy because you need to recuse
I've been
yourself.
recused myself.
So, no, which is fine, but that means now that we have Scott, we should probably put it on an agenda so Scott and I can actually talk about it. I think you might have the documents, but we can guess if you don't. Basically, we haven't looked over how we handle part-time employees and the policy that governs things like leave or vacation or any of that stuff in quite some time. I think did we just address, that was only for full-time. So, that would include, say, if a worker works Thursdays at the library and the library is closed for Thanksgiving or like last year, Christmas and New Year's fell on Thursdays. Do they just lose their shifts? Can they make up their hours? Do they like what happens to them? They lose all that income because they're part-time workers. Do we wanna look at that policy? Do we not wanna look at the policy? But that's kind of what's involved. So, I mean, at the very least, I think we should have a discussion, even if we decide to leave it unchanged. It's occasionally gotta readdress it. So can we put that on an agenda for a future meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the handbook, the board is aware of the questions that you have already for us. I'm gonna recuse myself, I think, for the two questions you've already had, but, another one that's come up recently is donating sick time. Do you know, I don't think our current handbook says anything about it, but is that something that could be included? We're gonna make a decision hopefully today about this particular instance, but that's the only other thing that I can think of that's come up that maybe should make its way into the handbook, one way or another.
And we don't have anything currently that has to do with, the only thing I've heard in respect to that would be a sick time bank, which needs to have like an administrator. They need to somebody needs to oversee it and make sure it's done correctly. So that would be the other side of it, and like sick time bank is a little past just donating, so your sick simply saying you want to allow people to be able to donate their sick time to others.
There's a particular instance that's involved, if the person is a relatively new employee and doesn't have accrued sick time and has a pretty bad family emergency, and there are other employees that are willing to donate their sick time to that person. But I'd like to, but as a bigger picture, the sick time bank seems like something that would have been able to address that problem had we had one, so.
Yes and no, but actually probably not, because you'd still wanna put like a standard, like preliminary period in with that. So this is another one of those things where you're gonna have to decide whether you wanna honor like somebody being too new to have that benefit, or to give them something right away, even if it's based on somebody else donating it.
Right,
Because
we know we have to make this call, but I guess we were asking if there is a policy we should think about creating.
And it's also living with the implications of like, not everybody's as popular as everybody else, and like, what if somebody's has an emergency and they're not friends with everybody yet, and then like, what then? They've heard about somebody else getting sick time donated and nobody's willing to give it to this like particular person. It can like, I don't know, it's just.
It'd be a little demoralizing
Right.
if you're that person that just came on or perhaps is struggling to
Right.
fit in,
Mm-hmm,
yet who still wants to try and become that employee.
exactly, so that's something to consider before just saying, yeah, sure, let's let everybody donate everything.
Do you have any advice as to the particular situation that we're in? Because it seems common sense that people should be able to donate their sick time. But is there any reason we shouldn't allow that in this case?
Well, based on what I've just said, and then there's still the case where what kind of standard are we holding them to prove that there's actually something happening? Somebody could definitely take advantage of us, like a new hire that's coming on, they don't know the town, they're really just trying to get a benefit from us.
Mhm.
They're gonna run with something like this if they can.
Unless we can document that the issue exists,
Right, and then
like the
it's.
person is medevac to Boston, for example.
Right, well,
Not to
there's
use a
always-
specific example or anything.
Yeah, there's always extenuating circumstances.
No, I know, but in extenuating circumstances, it would be good to have a way, like, if a person has that kind of significant legitimate issue, I would feel bad if there was no way to address it. Sorry, you're just out of luck, you haven't been here for a year. I'm like,
Rebecca, did you have something to?
Well, the state requires just documentation, and you can get it from their website of what for those that participate in the Family Medical Leave Act. So it's not a big deal. If you have to be in the, 30, 90 days or whatever you set, and you have to get documentation from the doctor if there's a medical issue, or you have to take care. Someone's not gonna take advantage if you have the proper documentation, and that's what the state requires, so and
what's
as I
the,
had said to Justin in an email, you should really see about trying to get into the state program. About when it came out, the select board decided not to join the program.
the family medical leave?
The paid family medical leave.
Right. And
That's different
so,
than the family medical leave.
Okay.
I don't know if municipalities, it was optional. I don't know if you can join after the fact, but it's a great program.
So could you please explain the difference between family medical leave, which it sounds like we might be.
So automatically, whenever there is like an instance like this, there is a criteria still, they have to be working on average a certain amount of weeks during the year, so I would have to check that, because I do not know that offhand. But family medical leave is just holding the place for the person that has to be out, and if they're out with a medical issue, or if they have a family member that's out with a medical issue and they need to take care of them. Paid family medical leave is the same almost, but they're getting an average wage. So we'd have to start contributing, it's almost like, it looks like a tax on a paycheck. So all the employees contribute. We could either go, since we're so I'm only speaking from the private sector because this hasn't been a thing since I've been in the public sector. We were doing it privately through Guido's, so we were using like an insurance company to administer this benefit. Or you can do it through the state as a program, so the employee would go through the state to apply for the paid family medical leave. They'd send in all the necessary information, which includes like doctor's notes of what's happening and how many days they feel they're gonna need or time off. So it's just it's an added like security factor.
And and the employees pay something each paycheck that goes into that.
Correct, it's like a
Insurance
tax,
policy,
it's
it's
automatically
essentially an
taken out.
insurance policy.
Yeah.
Town pays as well. It's like, it
Right.
comes out to 50-50,
The
but it's
Social
a different kind
Yeah,
of
it's just like
formula.
Social Security.
And it works just like unemployment actually, because the employer's out of it. The employee deals with the state like it's unemployment online, and they can get up to, I think, 12 weeks of paid time after they've worked 90 days, so. And that's state, that's not federal, but she
I
was
think
talking
the
about
issue here is
before
the
was
employee
federal.
hasn't been here 90 days.
That's what I was wondering myself.
Right.
Well, I don't know, I
And
just,
it's about donating, not about the family medical leave.
Right, this
Right,
is like
it
an
just brought
extended.
this is one case, but it brings up the bigger case that was like,
Mhm.
And I think it could be addressed in the handbook. Do you know what other towns are doing?
I haven't heard
You
about
haven't
any
heard
other
about it.
donating circumstances.
Okay, do you know if any of your other towns are involved in the paid family medical leave?
They're not.
act?
they're not.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
that's the handbook. Two of the items on our agenda for discussion and decision for you, Sophia, are items about the town clerk and accommodations that have either been put in place or that are now being requested, or at least changed. One of the items, number 3, I don't think we can discuss the actual email in question because it would constitute a charge or complaint against a town employee, so they would need to be noticed and offered executive session. Well, we wouldn't need to offer executive session, but we would need to notice them, and we likely would offer them executive session. But we can discuss the request itself, but not the email.
I would prefer that, since it involved, the request is based upon a complaint, that the complaint be properly investigated before we even consider.
Well, this is my motion. I would move that, since they're both discuss return to full communication with town clerk and town clerk request for new office hours, since they are both essentially questions of reasonable accommodation or accommodation, and I think that's something that the HR director is most well suited to handle. I would move that we delegate making decisions on these two items to the HR director, who can proceed, at her own discretion, whether whatever she wants to do to make decisions, because I think based on the policy we just passed, the HR director is in many ways in charge of reasonable accommodations. So that's my motion.
Are you okay with it?
Well, that's kind of what's happening already, I suppose.
Okay.
But I would like input at least to do with scheduling, because I don't have a full picture on that. That would be my only thing. I probably don't want to make a decision on my own bill.
Well, I
But
think,
we don't need to discuss it right now.
yeah, I think in some ways, if we are delegating that responsibility to you, which I think that we should do, because I think it's in line. I went back to the policy we just passed, and it wasn't
Which policy?
the anti-discrimination and
Okay.
harassment, and it actually isn't entirely, it doesn't say like the human resources director shall necessarily do reasonable accommodations, but that is the general sense I get out of it. And there is a line at the bottom that's actually about disability, but it says direct request for reasonable accommodation to the human resources director. So I think the general feeling of that policy is to have the human resources director decide on reasonable accommodations.
I would agree with you, in principle. I will say that I think that if Sophia is asking for some direction from us concerning hours, it's reasonable for us to say that our conversations about work hours over the last few months have mostly revolved around the fact that we thought it was important, since it's a public-facing position, for the great majority of those hours to be during normal business hours. And I believe that we've had that discussion multiple times, and that we were pretty clear about that that we were okay with some evening hours and some weekend hours, but ultimately we wanted the majority of the hours to be during normal working hours. And I think we've had some incidents recently that could have been avoided had there been better communication and and everybody here during normal working hours. So I think if she's looking for input on that, it's important for us to give it, at least to set the background for why we wanted the hours we wanted. Because how could she make a ruling about that otherwise?
I don't think this needs to be discussed right now,
Okay.
so let's keep it going.
I would like to clarify if the board agrees. Is there a second on the motion?
Yeah, I'd second you next.
Is there any further discussion or public comment? So I'm going to call a vote, and the motion is to delegate the items 1 and 3, so discuss return to full communication with town clerk and town clerk requests for new office hours to the human resources director, as they are requests for reasonable accommodation. And it's second motion, and I'll call a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so unanimous, yes vote. The last specific thing that I note on the agenda for our dealings with you, Sophia, is unsustainability of current role as human resources director. And
Which maybe we should have done before, I'm just gonna put it out there.
I believe this is something that you've added, but if you would like to explain.
Okay, so, well, as you all know, I'm only here on Wednesdays, but I find that I come into a lot of emails, and then I'm in a lot of meetings, and then by the time I actually get to completing tasks like handbook, that I have maybe like an hour or two to designate to that, which lends it, I just feel like my time's not being used efficiently. And because of the structure of how the select board works, it really stings for me because I have to meet with you all individually, which I find a great value in still. It's just we have to kind of think of a better way to have this happen. And I don't wanna conclude with like the best way, I want us to kind of think about this a little more. So maybe it's designating one-on-ones to maybe like one Wednesday in between now and then our next public meeting. Something like that, and I know the other thing that happens is that things come up and then I have to reestablish what my priorities are as well. So I'm really trying hard to act as a full-time HR director here, and I think I'm falling short because it's unreasonable and unsustainable for me to actually act in that way, only being here one day a week.
So I can really understand where you're coming from. One of the items that you mentioned, and that I know is a big project, and that if was done, would kind of maybe free up your schedule to more maintenance, is the handbook, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had some back and forth with Melissa a couple months ago, and I was trying to discern if any money was available in the HR funds account. And we had kind of figured out, but part of the problem is that there's shared costs between the towns, right? And also Susan and I had discussed, I don't know, I don't need to go into all the background. We could possibly bring in outside help to do the handbook. That way you could focus on the day-to-day. That's just one ideally.
So,
I think there's also a lot of value in you doing the handbook, since you've done it in the other towns. And since once the handbook's in place, you'll be operating, under the handbook, so it should be, I can see the value in you doing it. But I'm just creatively thinking of how can we free up Sophia's schedule. One way would be to, if we have the funds available, which I'm not 100% sure on.
I don't know if that's, like, I've already written one for Sheffield, I don't know what value you're gonna, or what difference you're gonna get from bringing in somebody else.
Well, I think to free up your schedule,
that's all.
Yeah.
because we
It
don't
might
have,
not be
Yeah,
helpful,
I'm
just
open to-
directing them could create more work,
yes, and so it's just an idea, but we're kind of working within a lot of limitations because you're working in 4 other towns, which is what we all agreed upon. And I'm certainly not saying that that shouldn't be the case. I'm just saying it's not like we can say, hey, Sophia, do you have an extra day? We'll pay you for 2 days instead of 1. And it's not like we have the money to do that anyway. So do you have, so one idea would be to limit select board meetings to once a month individually, which I think I've met with you twice or something, so, I don't know.
No, like I said, it's like a hard place to be because I need the one-on-ones as well, so it's not like I don't wanna meet you all separately. And it's also like catching up from the week, so things go down in the meeting and then I need to be updated on them. And I know that all the towns agreed that like, if something's going on in one town, that like I make it my priority, but in HR, like, everything's like a priority to an extent. And when I'm not here, it's not that I don't wanna like check my email every once in a while from Monterey, but like there's some complex issues happening in this town and I don't wanna like half butt them, if you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
so.
There is this is kind of an aside, but I find it interesting, there's a feature in the email to mark as unread. So sometimes if I don't know I can't deal with an issue, I will open it and skim it and then mark as unread.
I do that as well. I do that.
I don't know, other than, I don't know, it seems like we have more work for you than we have hours for you.
The other
Yes,
question,
correct.
looking slightly more long-term, is the other big thing that I think will come into play when the handbook is done is annual reviews of everybody. And that's gonna involve quite a lot of time, I would imagine. Like, what's the total count on employees?
That Sophia will participate in.
Yeah,
Right, well, I won't be in all of them, but
Right,
I
she's
would,
only
I'll
gonna
be.
be in 2.
oh, okay,
The other one she'll assist me with.
Right.
gotcha.
I'll be present, but, yeah.
Well, no, but if you're present, that's still your time.
No, I know, I'd love to accomplish these projects.
Oh, well, I
I'm
know,
just
I'm
trying to
just
figure out
worried about how we manage your time and make sure we use you effectively.
Mhm.
I'm not feeling like you're trying to beg out of anything at all. It's just, we probably have more than 1 day of work for you, and we have to figure out how to prioritize that for you, so you're not unduly burdened. Did I correctly state that?
Is this just a Monterey problem, or is this a general problem with all your towns? Well, it's a new position for everyone, and some towns you go and you're like, oh, everything's all,
No, I would say like everybody's trying to make me full-time right now. That's why I'm saying like when I leave here, I'd love to be able to skim everyone's emails like during the day and be able to work on 5 towns at once, but it's also like the nature of HR is that I really need to focus on one town at a time. And no, it seems to be busy everywhere.
Eileen, you have,
Hi, Eileen. First of all, we want dibs on your time from the other 4 towns. But secondly, maybe there's an interim solution where like, I don't know how long an employee handbook takes to write. You said you've written one from Sheffield. I know there are some boilerplate sections that we can say that's a 20-hour project. And maybe just instead of saying, let's take it over time, let's get that done. Because it's a pretty big risk, not to have a handbook and not to be able to work off of something. So if we can do that, maybe as a separate project, and maybe a project fee, I know we can't pay this consultant, but if there's a way to do that, do you know what I
So,
mean?
yeah, I mean, I guess the hard part, Eileen, is that there's other, like Sophia says, pressing matters. We just
Exactly.
delegated a couple more of them to her today.
Right, but what I'm
So-
saying is if it's a project, maybe she, she's binge watching, I'm not saying you do this, but like she'll work on it 3 hours on the weekend because it's a separate fee, it's not included in her already fee.
I don't know that we have the funds.
And we do have a handbook already, she's just updating it.
Right,
Oh, so how many hours do you estimate the project?
cannot give you by hours.
How old is it?
It's not as though it's challenging, it's just me organizing
Time-consuming.
what I have right now.
And one thing that's happened, Eileen, is that over the years, amendments have been made, and it's not always consistent between sections.
Right, so to read through.
So it's. Yeah, I don't have any,
Alright, what's the
other
next?
than the one idea that I suggested, and we could plan on doing your, monthly meeting with the select board, and then the next 3 weeks you meet with each one individually, barring something coming up, which things come up. Other than the one idea I suggested, do you have any answers, Scott?
Answers?
Yeah.
Ooh, not yet. I guess I have a question, and I haven't heard anybody ask you directly yet. What do you need from us? What would make your job better for you to do and easier to complete?
More hours, more hours, I think.
More hours? Are you
That's really the
capable of doing more hours?
She's gotta be careful how she answers.
You don't have to answer today, but I think that
Right,
was the
that's true.
question, is
Right.
what can we do? Because one of the things we always tried to do in the past was to ask the person who needs help, what help do you need and how can we get it to you? What can we do to make your job better and easier?
You know what, something did just come to mind, and maybe working from home on certain days, although I know there's other implications attached to that statement, but I'm saying it because then,
Less disturbed.
yes, less disturbed. I'll probably work longer than like 6 hours, and
Travel time and everything else.
exactly. So that's one idea. I mean,
What's your current schedule Monday to Friday, because you work Monday to Friday, right?
mhm.
Of where you physically work each day?
On Monday, I'm Great Barrington, in Great Barrington. Tuesday, I'm in Sheffield, and then once a month, I'm in West Stockbridge for the afternoon. Wednesday, in Monterey. Thursday, New Marlboro, sometimes Great Barrington, and then Friday is either at home, Great Barrington, or in Great Barrington for like pretty much a half day.
So your week is fairly full.
So it's structured to help my brain function better.
And is that 40 hours,
That's 35.
35?
That is what I'm appointed as.
So there's a few hours floating around that could possibly be grabbed here and there.
Or she could eat.
No, she's paid for 35.
Yes.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that in the course of a week, there's more hours still that could be
If
funded.
she was willing to, right,
Right.
if we had the money,
Right.
Correct,
could
that's
we,
all,
I
that's
think
my,
what he's
that's all
saying
my
is,
point.
if we had the money, could we offer, would you be willing to work more hours if we could pay you 4 hours?
I would like to see
No.
the offer, and
Right.
then I will consider.
Okay.
That's a possibility with
Or
the funds that
project-
we have, I mean.
I will answer politically.
Okay,
Yeah.
so-
No, it's very well put.
Alright, I don't know why the chair fell on me. Alright, so I think the exercise that Melissa and I were working on a couple months ago, it would be helpful if we could finish. Because we were trying to determine how much money is going to be excess, because we allocated $10,000 at annual town meeting. And we didn't necessarily need that for our portion of the shared funds. There's some uncertainties about what costs may have arisen, like phone or X, Y, and Z, and how they're going to be split up between the towns.
Mhm.
So we have some uncertainty, but if we figure out if we have $2,000 over the course of the year, or $5,000 over the course of the year, I would think we would pay Sophia at her same, or we would offer to pay Sophia at her same rate that she's already working at. How many hours would that look like? And maybe if it was more needed now, and we just add hours now, we can make that offer. Because if we split it up, it may only be 1 hour a week or less.
Might be better to load it, front load it, rather
If-
than
or at
spread it
least
over the year.
If we make that offer and then see what we get back.
I don't want you all to stress about this for now, I will say, cause mentally, I don't know if I can handle any more hours. I do wanna just do a disclaimer for that. I think if I can have 1 or 2 more shifts that I can really just focus on the handbook, then I will have it sorted.
That's good to hear.
If that's like the big project that it's looming over me now, that I guess it is.
Okay.
I just wanted to keep you all abreast on like my struggles and where I am at mentally. Cause obviously I'm not looking for more money, it's just, that's why I'm not trying to promote me having a longer week, because this is, like I said, complex work and it is mentally taxing on me as well, so. Before you go through the process of coming up with hours and a new offer, just take that into account. I'm not saying it won't lead to that anyways, but just so you all know.
We just wanna make sure you realize we recognize that there's more work than there is time. And we're just trying to figure out how to help you with that in any way we can come up with, which hasn't been a lot of ways, but that was one of them.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Anything else, Scott? No. Do you have anything else, Sophia?
Oh, can you sit in on the PD interviews? Or any takers for the police officer interviews? Because there are quite a few of them, and in the hopes to save some time again,
I'll do it.
having like a select board present, as when it comes back to you all, to have somebody who can account for what happened.
Ideally, it would be the same person in all of them if we're doing it.
I'd be more than happy to do it.
So I guess maybe we need to understand your process a little more, because I think what you and I were talking about this morning was maybe trying to avoid the second interviews of every candidate. So when we make our recommendation to you, if it's, 1 or 2 or whatever, that you either take our recommendation and run with it, or if you're envisioning interviews, maybe we were
Okay.
thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, having a select board member there, and we were actually thinking you, Justin, because you seem to be the one most concerned last time, that you would be able to report back to the board that you're comfortable with our recommendation.
So I think there was a miscommunication, maybe last time, which is what's leading us to this discussion, which was the way that I read the plan for hiring a police chief, which ultimately turned out well, and I'm not trying to say it didn't turn out well. But the way I read the plan was that preliminary interviews would offer a field of candidates, hopefully a narrow field of candidates to be interviewed by the board. This is a little bit different because it's not a department head, so I don't know. We haven't really had much board involvement at all in employees who aren't department heads for the highway department or other departments. But I thought with it being a department head, that first interview committee would basically recommend a narrow field of candidates. So if there were 10, they would interview 10 and come back with 2 or 3, no more than 4. That was what I envisioned.
I think we all envisioned that.
Yeah. So when you came back and said, we interviewed 2 and both went well, and we recommend that you only interview 1, I was surprised because I thought 2 would be a good number to interview in the second round. This being different, not being a department head, usually, as long as I've been on the board's had no involvement in hiring non-department heads, right?
So then you'd be okay with no selectmen there.
I don't think we haven't,
I don't see any reason to be
Before.
involved unless you
Okay, we
do.
won't change
If
that.
Scott wants to go,
I certainly do. I don't ever wanna go back to where we were 5 years ago with an officer that became,
No problem.
just became.
Right.
And if that could get rooted out prior to, save yourself a lot of grief.
I'll give him a schedule then.
So what's our current panel? Me, you,
And
Scott, and
Brian.
Brian.
how many candidates qualified for a first interview?
We have 5 or 6 were interviewing.
5 or 6, and there's 2 positions.
And there was 7 candidates total and 2 we did not choose.
Okay.
They didn't meet preliminary requirements or?
Yeah, I'll have to check with Brian, he was the one that chose who he wanted to
Okay.
interview and.
And so, the only other question that I have is, will this interview committee basically come back with a recommendation of 2 officers for 2 positions is what I would expect? Different from my expectations for the last process because it was a department head.
Okay.
Yeah,
I would say if the interviews go that well, I mean, if they don't, then it's possible we could come back with 3 and have you choose who the 2 are. But
Right.
I think ideally, we'd like to pick 2. That's our plan.
How many internal candidates are there out of the?
Scott, that means one's tomorrow. Sorry for the short
Yeah.
notice.
Wow,
Yeah.
It's okay. I work in town.
But I will agree with Scott, I'm not opposed to having board involvement in hiring. I just know that we typically have, so this will actually be a little bit of a change in the direction of board.
But given
Actually, what this is it's going back to where we had been. Because the board always was part of hiring officers. We would question every single person who came through. How does one particularly slip through the gap? Good disguise, I suppose. So, I think that somebody should just be there as another set of eyes and ears to listen mostly. Be a good listener. You can amazing what you hear. And
And
sometimes what you don't hear speaks just as much. So I'll just volunteer that if the board would
And I'm happy to have
prefer
you doing it.
not to, then fine.
No,
Not
I'd
trying
love
to
to have
be-
you do it, I think it's a good idea.
What time is that meeting?
One.
One tomorrow and then next Wednesday it's from 10 until about 5.
10 to 5?
There's some half hours in
Yeah,
between
there's some
there.
half hours in between where you can take. a
With your
break.
6 o'clock select board meeting.
Bring your lunch.
Yeah. So
Bring
you
your
still
lunch
wanna-
box.
Well, given an hour for each and then we put a half an hour in between so we could walk around and stretch our legs and
Okay,
discuss and.
all right, so tomorrow is at 1? 1 to 2?
Hopefully 2.
I mean, how many are we talking to?
Just one tomorrow,
Okay,
that they weren't able to do the following week due to training.
pardon me while I set my alarm clock.
All set?
I think so.
All right, thank you for joining us.
Yep.
Let's continue to think about your role and hours and any solutions, any ways to resolve that.
And if you need further guidance on the things that we ask you to look at,
Mm-hmm.
just send us something so that, you know, what you'd like guidance on, so we can have a conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sophia, what was the date of you said next Wednesday, 10 to 5?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
16th. I will be available by email after this.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. Have a good day. We do have a meeting at 1 PM, but we have some time before then to keep going with our agenda.
Are you with Camp Kimama? No. Okay.
No.
Do you
So-
wanna do Kara's and I can wait on my stuff if you wanna do Kara's.
Yeah, let me take a look real quick. Yeah, I think we will, if there's no opposition, jump to 6B, since we have a member of the public here. So last week, we met and discussed ARPA funds. which we had allocated some of, but not most of until last week. And we allocated all of the remaining funds at the meeting last week, including 10,500 towards the Historical Society to hire a consultant
So I have a few questions about.
regarding the National Register Historic District application. Yeah, do you wanna start with your questions?
Yeah, so I sent an email, I think on the fourth.
It was like the Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, only because after the meeting is when we were told that they were gonna be getting the funds for it. My first question is, where did the $10,500 come from? Where they,
ARPA.
no, I mean, who came up with that amount of money to give to them for this district?
Their
This-
proposal asked for.
It was their
that.
request.
Okay,
Everybody who's asked for ARPA funds had to come up with a certified
Yes.
request form.
so did they have to, I'm just curious where the money exactly is going, who it's going to.
So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be going to the Historical Society?
Yes,
Pardon?
so
No, it's the.
It's one of the two, right?
It's
the Historical Society, so let's backtrack a little bit. So we had a Historic District Study Committee that was an appointed town organization, town group that worked under, that was appointed under the select board. That was supposed to advise if the village center here should be a historic district, and if so, how to proceed. This spring, we actually appointed a historical commission, which is a little bit more, has a little bit more teeth than a historic district study committee.
Yeah.
I have been to a lot of their meetings, and basically, they have already applied back in the 90s to be a historic district, and individual buildings, I believe, have applied to be historic buildings, and basically, it's not, what they're coming to realize, or what they realized was, it's not an application that basically a volunteer group of citizens can fill out. You need to hire a consultant. So the funds were proposed basically to hire a consultant to do things like taking pictures of all the buildings and writing about the historic nature of them to help the application. One thing, as you may know, because I think you've received a letter, is they need the support of the majority of the
So that's where
people
I'm going with it, is
living in the district.
I'm wondering why they were given funds to do this without the support, without the majority support.
So.
And we just received, sorry, I just wanna clarify, I don't wanna argue the historical district, that's for me to argue with them about. As a homeowner, myself and my in-laws own 4 private properties within this district. I'm aware that the Sheridans next to me are not in favor of it, let me clarify that we are not in favor of it. The Amsteads, who own a lot up there, are in this district, are not in favor of it. I just know by speaking with other people, they don't have a majority. To add to that, they sent this vote out, are you in favor as a property owner, are you or not, months ago. They didn't get the answer they were looking for, and they sent it out again last week, after they already got the funds for it. Why didn't they present it to you that we have the majority, we're ready to apply for it, now we need the money to do so? It should have been
So.
clearer that we're not wasting $10,500 for a consultant to do something that half of the homeowners are not in favor of anyways, it's a waste of money.
So to clear up a couple things from my point of view, so the historic district runs to from the fire station to the brewer house, 471. So the Amsteads,
They own a lot of, on this side of the fire station across the street as well.
okay, so they may be involved.
I'm not talking about the Fox Hill properties at all.
Yeah.
They have rentals across from
So-
the fire station, but
And I was there when they were counting the votes, and actually, the votes were really very positive and supportive of the district.
then why did they do a revote last week?
What they did was they were reaching out to people who didn't send in a vote at all, because they needed 50% of people to say yes, not 50% of the people who voted to say yes.
Mm.
So my recollection, and we could ask the Historical Society for the actual numbers, but they had just about 50% of people had voted and all but a small handful were yes votes. So
Additionally, I'm concerned that their numbers aren't accurate. They sent Wendy and Lee Tryon one vote for each of them. They own multiple properties. So are they counting them as, those are two property owners in the village? Not, those are two property owners of one property. They should really be entitled to a vote for that property and that property and that property.
Yeah, so it's
They should be
a
allowed
little-
6 votes between the two of
Yeah.
them, instead
So
of just the
it
2 that
is a
they were
little,
given.
it is a little bit confusing, and I guess the general question you're asking is, why didn't they get the support and then ask for the money?
Yeah.
But the problem
Well, that's
is,
actually my sub-question
Yeah,
to it. My biggest one is, why were the ARPA funds used for it? When
So-
it's not at all what the ARPA funds are designed for.
okay.
But-
So let me address why
We'll go
they
here.
asked for funds. It has been incredibly difficult as a group of volunteer citizens, for them to even figure out what exactly is needed to progress the application, even to the stage of asking for votes. There's been a lot of questions exactly like you're asking.
Mhm.
Do Wendy and Lee get one vote for each property, one vote for each home, because they're two different
Mhm.
people? And it's very technical.
Mhm.
And they've been working through them as best they can, but it's hard to even do that when you don't have the knowledge and the technical assistance, which is why you hire a consultant.
Mhm.
So that's why you're seeing, the votes coming in and asking for money, because what the money would actually help fund is someone who knows the answers to those questions.
Mhm.
And if, they start to fund someone and the support just isn't there,
Then what happens to the money that's left over?
well, I think it would probably come back to ARPA if there were unspent funds that were allocated through ARPA. But the point being, it's hard to even figure out how to get majority support and who counts as a homeowner. It seems very simple, right? Everyone just votes.
No,
But
I
like you said, some
understand
people
that.
own multiple properties. What happens when you have co-owners? What happens when you have a condo association, right?
Yeah.
It's very complicated. So what the funds would do is not a stamp saying, okay, we want a district, now just put it in place. It's to get a consultant to even to figure out the majority support, or not. The other question that you asked about ARPA, that you say is your main question, I think it doesn't, immediately solve any problems, but in the long term, having the district does provide tax incentives to income producing properties in the district. So,
It also adds more expense than income.
How so? I'm just curious.
Look at this, you're a builder, right?
Oh, yeah.
Look at how much stretch code has added. We've built multiple properties here, and having to do it in a stretch code district or,
I hate to tell you, but I fought that tooth and nail. I said that'll be the death of this town and many small towns,
I have had to spend
thousands.
hundreds of thousands more than I should have on building houses.
So
I have to spend per property, just for example, per property, I have to spend $2,000 for somebody to tell me that my plans meet stretch code. That's just $2,000 just for somebody to say yes, to get a building permit to do the work. To get my plans and the house proposed to meet all of those, I have to add $20,000 to my insulation budget, $10,000 to my window budget. It adds up.
Yeah.
So something like this that I know right now, we can say a historic district won't add any red tape to it. This is what the national one looks like. we're leaving the door cracked, that in the future, okay, now we have a historic district, it's a lot easier in the future to then have somebody come in and say, okay, let's add some regulations to it, so you're in the historic district, you can't paint your house purple. I should be able to paint my house whatever color I want. I know right now you're saying that I am, and that this won't change that. But this is kind of leaving the door cracked that maybe in the future somebody could tell me I could do that.
But I'm gonna give the counterpoint. It also gives you the ability to do some things that you might want to do. For instance, get funding either state or federal or through a number of other things to renovate a house that you would not be able to get right now. You couldn't even apply for it because it's only available to historic houses. Number two, you can actually get waivers for some of the codes if you're a historic building. Yeah,
I
Right.
get that.
right, those are things you can't get access to now. That this would allow people that wanted to make use of those things.
And I think that's
Including
where
the
my
town.
specific, okay, so there are a few properties that, yes, if we were in a historic district, it might make sense for. The old tea room, too bad it's come down
Right,
now.
yeah.
That would have been a good one.
Right, yeah, right.
June's house now, I can see that being historic, but you can't tell me my house that was built in, what, the 50s, 60s, 70s? That's not
Probably-
historic.
No, it wouldn't.
So if I go to apply for something like this to better my house,
That-
they're gonna look at it and say,
But
you
if
don't
it-
have a historic
But it
building,
only
just
applies
because you're in
to
a.
houses that are within the historic.
Well,
I think overall, the whole thing has been presented to redo the schoolhouse.
no, I mean, it was brought up as one of the points.
And I can see that benefiting, I just don't see ARPA funds being used as the beginning of that process. I think, in general, the historical district, why isn't that being funded by the town budget and voted on by the town?
Because it
It's a
adds-
huge thing.
Well, it adds tax burden to you, me, and everybody else that's in this town, whereas this was money that was
But
granted.
this money was granted for something completely different.
So I think, and it's a,
At the time of its inception, ARPA had a much narrower scope. But as time passed and COVID passed, they opened up the aperture a lot
And I
wider.
think we're taking advantage of that.
Well, that's your opinion, for certain, and that's if you listened to last week's meeting, I questioned the very same thing. I said, how do you say that this has any bearing on ARPA?
Mm.
And she came up with enough convincing things that without being a lawyer and without having the regulations in front of you, I agreed to the funding of it. However, since you're here and this is something that's going on, I am strongly opposed to the creation of a historical district without full town support and an annual town meeting. And that if they wanna go forward with their $10,000 survey, I'm good with that, let them take that fund and run. But prior to anything being initiated, the town is gonna fully vet this out up at the firehouse. And that is, to me,
I believe
only
that that'll happen
place
and that we'll
that
get there.
this it becomes finalized.
The only fine line here is the money used from something that should have been used, it's a COVID relief fund.
so, and it's a very long
This is
term.
such a large
Yeah.
town issue to be using
Care,
COVID relief funds.
It's a very long-term view, but the tax benefits that income producing properties in the district, and we all know or have a sense of how hard it is to run a business in Monterey. You know, the tax benefits to income producing properties in the district that could be, would benefit the town of Monterey. It's beneficial to have, a store open and to have rentals and such like that.
Something.
And it's a very long-term view because it would be a long time before it even is finally approved. I mean, this process in every town, West Otis just did it, New Boston just did it, it takes years. And part of what I've seen by going to their meetings is it is a group of volunteer citizens, like I've said before. And as they're trying to ask questions, like how do we get majority support? How do we proceed with the application? You have to take pictures, you have to write up things. They don't even know how to get the ball rolling. And I think that this was a long-term view.
I don't disagree with that. I'm mainly disagreeing with, that should have been a town-wide decision to fund something like this to begin, or to have a committee to say, this is what's beneficial for the town, yes, we should go with the district, this is what we need to do. It's the ARPA funds that are a bit,
Yeah, and so I think we disagree, and, it's a precarious situation, because almost always we're spending funds that were agreed upon at town meeting. The ARPA funds are an exception to that, and I think frankly, everything we spent the money on, it did, I remember at one point saying, we really should ask town meeting for approval on the use of ARPA funds, but it just didn't make sense, I think, to put off making those decisions when the money was available, and the only authority for spending those funds was the select board. We could have put a referendum on the town meeting and say, does town meeting support select board using the funds these ways? But at the end of the day, it was going to be the select board spending those funds. That was just how the state drafted up the ARPA program, this part of it. So I don't know what to say.
Just a question for you. The playground money, the pavilion money, the cruiser, the lawnmower, does any of them, in your mind, fall under ARPA? Because to
they
me,
do.
they do.
I don't know what else you've used it for,
Well,
but
I'm just curious, could
the playground, yeah.
just discuss with me?
Children were affected by COVID.
But there's,
My
but
children
there's
have
already a
used,
playground out
my children have used that playground more during COVID than ever before, and I know that we need a new one. The fire department has had major changes in policies and just how they run in general, and having the money towards their, I think we used it for a chief's car or something.
The rescue vehicle.
The rescue vehicle, having it go up there for that helps with how they've restructured around COVID times.
The lawnmower, I mean, how do I relate that to COVID? How do I relate the pavilion to COVID?
You have more kids walking on the side of the road that
There's
need to be
only-
mowed. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you said that's what
I
I'm
wasn't here
saying.
for that one, and that
Well,
one doesn't
but-
affect
but-
my property, so this one is
Okay, so,
put in front of me.
well, don't be narrow-minded.
I'm not being
trying to-
narrow-minded.
I'm not
I'm
trying
saying
to accuse you of that.
I
but-
wasn't ever
but
notified of
in
that
my
one. That's where
opinion-
it's a fine line of,
Yeah,
it
but
should have been a town meeting thing where
well,
maybe,
in my opinion,
select
none of
board-
them fit to what I would consider.
but you can't, I don't know how much money the
Alright.
town got, but you can't
So my
put
response.
$100,000 into COVID tests.
Yeah, so my response at the end of the day, Kara, just to the point about it should have been town meeting, is I sat in on those meetings and it didn't seem like it would ever get to the town meeting point. I mean, it was unclear the technical part of the application and the majority support, all these questions came up that were just beyond what volunteer citizens can do. And it became very clear, if you looked at West Otis and New Boston and all of the other examples, that consultants were hired, and it's hard to make it anywhere in the process, let alone bringing it for support or bringing it to town meeting to be finalized without a consultant. So it was like you put the chicken before the egg, and it seemed like the right thing to do to get the ball rolling, and it's not a done deal. Still needs majority support, like we said, but that's why I think, the consultant makes sense now, to even proceed, to get it to the point of town meeting, to get it to that point. We couldn't get it there without a consultant, it would
No,
it'd be kind of a group of.
And that was a lot of what the questions were, was nobody on the other side of this knew that it was presented more as you got funds to apply for the historical district, and the people there are like, wait a minute.
Just for the record, by the way, all the information about putting in an application for the ARPA proposal, what was required, what was it, the sites for ARPA, it's all on the select board webpage. All of the applications we did get were all posted up there as well. they've come up at a bunch of meetings, so it was in minutes of the meetings, and it's on the agendas for the meetings where some of the things were discussed. So if you had, I know you
I
didn't
know
know
that,
about
I don't
this
have the
specific one.
time to sit there and monitor all
Yeah, I
of them.
didn't either, I get
And I'm
it.
fine not having the time, this
Right.
one affects me, so this is the one that
I get it, but I just wanted you to know,
present
it
for.
was
That's
all
just my
out there.
argument for the lawnmower, I
Yeah.
don't know, and I wasn't here to argue it.
No, I'm
Because I
just
didn't know
saying,
about
you said that you didn't know about them, I'm just letting you know,
Yeah.
it was out there if
Yeah.
you had looked for it, but you'd have to look for it, just like
Yeah.
many things, right? You don't know what bands are playing in town, if you wanna go to a concert, well, sure.
I think if the select board had created it in a way of, these are all of the applications we have, send a letter out maybe and say the next select board meeting, we're going to approve all of these ARPA funds, so that people can know all of those things, might be helpful, but doing it the way that you've done it comes with the risk of some people might be upset over one thing and not know about the other things.
I guarantee you, no matter how we do it, that
Oh,
was for
people
the
are gonna be
case.
upset over everything, I know that.
But thank you for raising the issue, and hopefully there's more clarity on where we were coming from, and
more importantly, where we are going,
Yeah, both.
Yeah,
because
and me coming
this
here
thing
wasn't
is,
trying
this
to
thing can
gain
end in a
anything out
minute.
of it, I just need to understand how things were working because I wasn't told.
I would say you guys, all the property owners in town can rest assured, there are no changes coming until the
Yeah.
entire town
Yeah.
has the chance to voice this out.
Well, I don't think legally they can.
Right,
Well, I don't
Definitely.
think it's even a matter of
Yeah.
legality, of course it is,
Yeah.
but
but we do it
nothing-
anyway.
It's going before the town
Mhm.
at some point, prior to any initiation of
Yeah, and that's
whatever they come
why
up
I
with.
said that's a different battle that we can have later on.
Had that gone through town meeting to approve $10,000 on the backs of the citizens to even look at it, I would doubt that would fly. There's just too many people that, like yourself and myself, who are just like, hey, do we
But
really
that's
need
kind
it?
of my point.
Well, then that's the
Then why
counterpoint,
were the three of you allowed to say, let's give them this money to do it?
because that was the
If you-
authorization from ARPA.
Yeah.
And we were allowed to.
It just feels from this side of it, like ARPA was used as a backdoor to go around
Oh, no.
having to bring it to the citizens who aren't in favor of it.
Well, no, because it's gonna come before us at some point. Won't
Yeah,
be
but
this
just
year,
to
it
get
may be
it to
2
that
years.
point, I mean.
yeah, and I think the long-term benefits are there, otherwise I wouldn't have supported it. I think the tax benefits for income-producing properties, it is nothing that's gonna benefit us today or in the next year, but down the road, it'd be good to have, make it just that much easier for running a business in the village, which is difficult.
It
It
might
may,
help the
right.
store open sooner and with less mishigas, I don't know. maybe
And
not.
I think the drawbacks are relatively, I think the drawbacks are relatively small, because as we've been over, there really are there's no added red tape, there's no added permitting.
But it's easy to say that now, and
But that's, if that was different, we might be in a different situation, but thank you for your time, we do have a 1:00 meeting.
that's good.
Thank you, Kara, for participating and,
Thank you for answering my
coming down
questions.
here, there's so many people.
I didn't mean to come off as like.
No, we get it,
Perfect.
and you have real concerns, and
Yeah.
I totally get that.
Alright, thank you, have a good day.
Respect.
Abby, I see you online, from Camp Kimama Half Moon. Thank you for joining us, sorry we're running a couple minutes late.
No problem.
Smile bigger.
So basically, I touched base with you earlier this week, and I did send along the letters that we had received. But we had received some, noise complaints.
She wanted me to make it bigger, but that's the only way
Yeah,
I
I
can
wanna
do
be
it
able to,
is
can't do it.
Maybe, what about active cameras?
Well, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
that better.
Sorry, we were trying to make the screen bigger, cause you were
Oh.
such a small pile up there that I couldn't really see you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so technical difficulties. But we had received a couple of letters from citizens. And here we have Don, the building official here as well. Thanks, Don, for joining us. We aren't really going to deal with I understand there's also some business between the camp and the building office, and that's really out of the select board's purview. But the noise, there's a disagreement on how much noise is acceptable, among other things.
Sure.
And as you know, the town of Monterey doesn't have a noise bylaw. So the only thing, when the police get called to a noise complaint, the only recourse they have is charging someone with disturbance of the peace, whereas a noise bylaw may be a lighter charge. So, we're in the process of trying to figure out how to smooth out relations between, the camp and its neighbors. And if a noise bylaw may help to do that, to set expectations more clearly.
Okay. So can I jump in and give you some information and some feedback?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So first of all, thank you, and I mean this, thank you very much for your time. I haven't met all of you, but my name is Abby Levine, and I'm the director of Kimama Half Moon. This, as you know, was our first summer. We are very, very excited to be a part of the community, of the Lake Buell community of Monterey. And first of all, we understand that for the last 100 years, the camp has been, and it is our aim for it to continue to be a summer camp for children, and that it's our goal and our desire to serve the community, Lake Buell, Monterey, the entire Berkshire communities. That's why we're there. Okay, so number one, so it is critical to us, and I'm not just saying this, to be good neighbors. As far as some of the noise things are concerned, we do need to iron some things out, and I'm glad that we're addressing it here so we can talk about, some things moving forward. I know that at the end of last summer, we did have a meeting with some neighbors that came to the camp, and what we had discussed at this time, and it was maybe 2 weeks before camp ended, was that prior to camp beginning this spring, so sometime in May, that we would reconvene the group that came. And at that time, what we're doing in the meantime, and we'd be able to bring to them in May, is really reassessing what our schedule looks like in terms of not just the timing of when we do things, but also the locations of camp where we do things. So that perhaps, as an example, the dancing that we have may not necessarily take place every day at the same place at the same time. We're looking at being able to move those locations and perhaps move those times, but also whatever we're doing, being able to iron this out and communicate with our neighbors. Okay, we want you to know this is what's going on, so they're aware. But we really were thinking too that in being able to move some of the, move around camp a little bit more and see maybe where there's less noise for our neighbors, we need to kind of work with that and get their feedback from that as well. So that's really, in terms of the noise, we understand and we do want to work with them. It's a children's camp and we want to work with the community. I think it's really a matter of ironing out the best way to do that. So that really is our plan. Like, I have every intention of contacting everyone that was at our meeting the end of the summer, sometime in May, so we can sit back down and go over what it looks like this summer and have a conversation as far as the noise issues were concerned.
Yeah, so to explain a little bit of our role, the select board's role in the situation, one of the things that the select board can do is propose bylaws to town meeting. And I mentioned this earlier, but we have, not only as a result of this current situation in your neighborhood, but it's come up before, we have been considering a noise bylaw, which might be more specific about times and expectations of noise levels. Do you think something like that would help you get along with your neighbors and iron things out, as you say, better? Or do you think that, no noise bylaw is needed and that you understand the expectations from your neighbors?
I think that the answer probably goes a little bit of both ways. I think that no matter how we come to it, whether it's through a bylaw, whether, in an ordinance, or on our own conversation, we need to come to an understanding of what we're doing in camp, the times and places that it's happening. So I think that I am confident that we could continue it because we're going into our second summer, and truly we see ourselves as part of the Lake Buell community. We are part of the Lake Buell community. And so truly, I do think that it's something that we can continue to have conversations, especially after going through this past summer and seeing where everyone's, points were, and really try and work that out and have constant, regular, ongoing, positive feedback, so that we can make constructive feedback. I do think that if there were an ordinance to come into place, whatever that process is, where members of the community are part of helping to determine what that ordinance looks like, then, we obviously would expect to be an active part of that as well. But do I think that we could iron something out without the ordinance? I do. I think it's a matter, look, again, it was our first summer, just meeting everybody, new for everyone. It also has been, this was also, I believe for 3 summers prior to this, because of COVID, it was only day camp that was running and not overnight camp. So, I think it was different on all ends. But I do know that we're taking very seriously what you're saying, and know that it's something that we need to work with 100%.
Thank you.
Can I bring up a couple other things? Or do you tell me where do you want to go?
If you want to, say, Scott, do you have a question? Abby, if you have something to say, please say it. Like I said, I know that there may be items between the building office and the camp, but that's really outside of our purview at the moment.
Sure. Well, let me tell you, as
But,
far as that's concerned with the building office and the camp, we are working, it's been a struggle, working with contractors and finding the people that we need to find to do what needs to be done. However, I am happy to say that we are now working with a contractor that is obviously licensed in Massachusetts. He has already pulled some permits and continues to pull more permits. And we have a list of things that we need to do to make sure that we're within code, and that work will happen. So I know it has been embarrassingly slow and not going as quickly as it should have been, but Don should be seeing now. I just received some copies of it this morning from the plumber, some of those permits that are being pulled, and they're submitting for more, and again, making the list of what we need to do for compliance. So and I know that they're also in touch with the gas inspector as well. So we take that very seriously.
Are there any other questions?
No, but there's people that are on that board that
Does someone have?
are on the Lake Buell.
Oh,
Yeah, are there any questions from the public?
well, I see waterfront issues. Can I address that?
Please.
Yeah.
Okay, so the waterfront issue. So a couple things. I appreciate when it was brought to my attention what they were seeing, that they were seeing kids going into other areas that they shouldn't belong in, and kids that looked like they weren't able to handle the boats. I can not tell you how much I appreciate that information, because it's critical. That's all about safety and about being good neighbors. So as soon as that was brought to my attention, we were dealing with it. But I will tell you that coming this season, we're dealing with it very differently because of the experience last summer. Number one, just to have an idea, we're going to have, in terms of safety on obviously only on our property itself, but we're going to have water lines where kids will be sectioned off and only permitted to go at certain areas at certain times, depending upon their swimming level. In terms of using any of the boating craft, they will all be instructed and tested and not allowed to use it unless we feel they are adequate to do so. There is no excuse for those things not to happen, and there's no reason why they should be going onto other people's property. So if in fact that happens, which from my perspective it better not, but if it does, please give me a call, because I really do want to know that so I can take care of that immediately. Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, well, I think, unless someone has something to add that I'm not aware of,
Justin,
I appreciate, who is that?
Don Tirico.
Oh, hi, Don.
Now that I have Abby, I'm just curious, have you applied for any permits on the building side? I mean, I know you have a plumbing gas permit in there, but there's no contractor has submitted any applications for the work that was already done at the camp.
They're working on it. That's exactly what they're working on. They're getting that information. They're going to be submitting permits for that. I talked to him again this morning and he said it's taking a while because there are about 12 or 15, I believe, total that he has to file for. But they are
Okay,
filing for it and making the list of all the modifications to bring it up to code.
great.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and your guidance.
Did you receive, just curious if you received that certified letter?
No, not at all. What certified letter?
Okay.
Don, it was returned today in the mail,
As
No.
undeliverable?
undeliverable, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So can we
All
speak
right.
offline? I can give you a different address to send it to. I definitely want to make sure we get that.
That's the legal record on the tax records that it was sent to, so whoever gave that address.
Okay. So how do we handle getting it to me?
I can set that up. We'll make sure that you're put in touch.
Please.
Um,
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
and
One
the-
last thing I want to bring up as well. Just in terms of security, I know there were some questions this summer because we did have a security guard on the premises and it was different because there was someone that was questioning people that he didn't recognize coming onto the property. So number one, know that that is put there for all of our safety. Okay. And and we're in a unique situation because there are other properties adjoining the camp property. So what we do need to do in our discussion, and I would like to, in May, have this be the first thing that we discuss as a group. How as a group would we like to handle that? Definitely there'll be security. So, but in terms of, the residents that live in Seven Arts and the residents that live, in the properties off the camp, adjacent to the camp, how do we want to handle that so that, you're driving into your home comfortably and not feeling uncomfortable at all? That is something that we need to iron out, but the security is there for all of us.
I see a written question from Kyle Haver, but I can't read the end of it. Not all property adjoin. Or does your mic work, Kyle?
Yeah, sorry, I'm joining now. It just hi Abby.
Hi.
We've texted over the summer. I was not aware of nor invited to this meeting that you
Oh,
had, and there are about 35 property owners around the Camp Half Moon area,
okay.
and I'm not quite sure how many were included in the invite or not.
I know that I received when we can go through it, but I know that I received a list from some of the residents that live there, but clearly then it was incomplete. So we need to get the complete list and do that. Absolutely.
And that I would believe is on the tax records, so you can sort of see where the adjoiners are
Okay.
and invite people to do that.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Just I'll pop off now.
Okay.
No. All right. Charlie Barnes. He doesn't seem to raise his hand or anything. Well, thank you, Abby. And
I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm not quite sure how to use your system here. I'm still figuring it.
yeah,
Is my hand raised?
you're on. We can hear you.
Yeah, I have this is more to the board as opposed to, hey, Ed, good to see you again.
Hi.
It's more towards the boards. I'd like to reemphasize a time limit on noise because, again, I was there most of the summer. And after we had our meeting, and we were very explicit that, noise late at night is very disruptive. After 10 o'clock, most of us are used to having or there because it's a reasonable expectation to have quiet after 10 o'clock at night. So after we had our meeting, after the camp ended, they had another big event there, which is, again, noise and loud dancing until midnight and beyond. And so I think that it's hard to rail in that without some type of authority or some position to have a demarcation. Okay, this is when lights are out. This is when it's quiet time. And I think if it's let to be an arbitrary choice, it's going to keep being pushed beyond. And that's just what my experience through the summer was. So I would like to put in a request that we find a reasonable time. Say this is taps. This is when we go silent. Because as much as I hear, we had a long conversation about the cultural immersion and that they use dancing as part of that, and that's wonderful. But at the same time, our culture and the beach and the lake is serenity. You want a peaceful time there. Um, that's disrupted, and that's reasonable to have that. We are neighbors. At the same time, if we, in the cove, especially where we live, that is inundated from 8 in the morning until late in the afternoon with kids and campers and noise. It's white noise, and it's okay. But to extend that into 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, which happens frequently, and it's dance music. It's techno pop dance coming out of probably I think the mess hall, and I think that's unreasonable. And without some type of guidance, some type of guideline for us to look at, say, okay, hey, 10 o'clock. I think if we just leave it arbitrary at this point and not have some authority figure say, here's the rules, and let's all play by these rules, I think we're going to be back in this position next year. It's just the escalation element of it. That's one thing I'd like to request. We have some type of formal ruling on give us a time. When is quiet time? When is it taps basically? And the other thing is in terms of the road, there is contention with some of the people in the code that the road is the divided. I'm not sure what the understanding and the ownership of the road is. Like neighbors say
That would be
that
a private road, right? Seven Arts is a private road.
the road that comes off of Pixley. There's a contention. I've had conversations with many of the adjoiners, let's call them, saying that the road is there's some misunderstanding of like who owns the road,
Right.
how much of the road is owned, and at some point we need to get a delineation on that. I'm not sure if that's something you can help with, but Abby, I think we need to have a conversation about the road itself because
Right.
the idea of there's rumors of a gate going in. I think that's a health hazard anywhere beyond the exact entrance to your property. But have it at Pixley, which I understand it was proposed, that's a health hazard. Fire trucks need access. People need access. So
100%.
that's a conversation that needs to be had with everybody who lives there.
Everybody.
Like, how are we going to do that?
Well,
And
and
I know you're amenable. I'm just voicing this because it's
no, I appreciate it. And so
yeah,
the road itself driving into camp,
yeah.
that one we did look at actually with one of the neighbors in Seven Arts on a survey map, and that road itself is owned by Half Moon.
Which
However,
neighbor was that? Which neighbor was that?
don't miss. I want to say it. I want to say it was Karen Curson. Don't misquote, but I don't want to throw her out there in case I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it was Karen.
I don't know that. I know that the one in particular, she's been there 80 something years, 70 years, and she's kind of the OG in the
Okay.
hood.
Okay.
And she made it clear, no, that's a mistake. So, again, this is something we need to
Oh,
look
and I know what you were
into.
talking about. She called me. You know what? We need to look at that map and just
Yeah,
have that
yeah.
in terms of
I
anything.
just want to put it here, this because I got you right here, so I can say right now.
Yeah,
That's something we should look into it jointly.
absolutely.
Also, the second thing is in terms of the Cove Beach itself.
Okay.
Are there any plans to extend your dock vertically out into the cove? Because again, it becomes that cove is small and intimate, and if that dock extends back out towards Kyle's house, now that's inviting more sort of. I mean, these are kids; they're
Right.
not going to obey the rules. We were all kids. I have a big concern about kids getting hurt because we have docks, we have aluminum docks. They get on a, like it happened last summer, and I want to make sure that there's something in place protections for us on the code. I don't know if the board
So
can help us.
the docks, there's a permitting process for docks and the authority in that process. So if there's any dock additions or
There is.
changes, then, that will go through its own process.
At the
Um,
current time,
As
there's
far
not.
as as far as what the select board is concerned with, is really the one item that we can move with is noise, and we will definitely consider making a noise bylaw so that expectations are clear from all parties and that there's a way to enforce it. And that could possibly happen. It wouldn't happen any sooner than May at annual town meeting. But that's really the one thing that I think the select board might be able to do to help smooth over relations. You know, a lot of these other items that we're talking about, building codes, dock permitting, those are all other departments, other people. But thank you all for your time and for bringing your concerns here. And like I said, the select board will seriously consider the prospects of a noise bylaw to get everyone on the same
I have one last concern I want to express very briefly, and Kyle needs to come on.
page. Briefly,
Yeah, briefly. There is the property, the camp bought a property in the cove itself, right on the beach. I'm wondering, is there any type of consideration of how that's going to affect the cove itself? Because apparently it's still being purchased, but they bought a house there right on the cove. And does that become part of the camp? And if so, how does that affect everybody else there? Is that's something that, do I talk to you guys? Do we talk to you about that? How does the camp owning that property affect that beach, the whole, does it extend?
so I think, you know, while that may be a very legitimate and real concern, it's not an issue for the select board. We don't deal with items
Who's
like
it an
that.
issue then? Who's it an issue? Who do you address it with?
So I think if you're talking about properties and merging properties, it might be the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, the zoning enforcement officer, or the assessor. And we can put you in touch with those resources. I'll get some contact information for you.
Thank you.
And at
And
this
get you
time,
that.
there's also no issue, like we're not extending the beach into the house or anything like that right now. We just own the house right now. There's no issue with that. No plan to bring that
Because
into
you
our,
just you bought a piece of land on the Seven Arts
Yes.
complex
yes,
down at the lake.
yes,
So now you are beholden to the bylaws of Seven Arts
Mhm.
for that property.
Mhm.
So the bylaws of Seven Arts are now in force upon the owners of Camp Kimama and the property that they just bought separately from the camp in a separate region of a separate piece of land. So I honestly don't see how that's gonna become part of the camp, but
Right.
that's not for me to determine.
Right.
However, they are now beholden to the bylaws that anybody else who owns at Seven Arts have to play by.
Based on that piece of property.
Yeah,
Kyle,
all
you're-
right, so.
All right, I'm
Thank
stepping
you.
out, Kyle. Have at it.
I'll be brief. Abby, I appreciate your learning from the first year and realizing that this is going to be a learning process, which is what I think we've always tried to move towards. And I appreciate some of the plans you have going forward. And I look forward to trying to find ways of resolving some of the issues that were apparent last summer. So thank you for being willing to do that.
absolutely.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Abby, and we will hope for and work towards a good resolution. And like I said, the select board's role is pretty limited. The only thing we're really talking about at all is the noise bylaw. I know there's a lot of other topics of conversation, and those will be dealt with by the appropriate,
Okay,
through the appropriate means. But thank you and have a good day.
thank you for your time.
That takes care of the 1 PM meeting. New business, town administrator items, evaluation tree clarifications.
Yeah, so last week you asked who would be doing the library staff, and I confirmed that Mark was doing the library staff and the library trustees do Mark. And the assessor's office, the principal assessor will be doing the clerk, and the board of assessors will be doing the principal assessor. As for the community center coordinator, outreach worker for the council on aging, office assistant, and Concom agent, I still need to reach out to them. They haven't had meetings yet, so I haven't been able to talk to the whole board as a whole, but I don't think that one's as crucial as their answers to the other ones.
Yeah, so the only question is what process will the committee play?
Right.
Yeah. All right, that sounds good to me. If there's no other questions, we'll move to the next item.
Yep.
So donating sick time to highway member for family emergency. Without going into too many personal details, there's a new member of the highway department who has a family emergency, and the question is if we can allow other employees to donate sick time so that he can attend to the family emergency and not lose his pay.
Like Sophia had mentioned, there's future implications in saying, sure, sounds like a great way that a small town gathers around itself. And I still want to think that that's the answer, that sure, these people are so willing to do it, why would we say no? Then there's the repercussion of the future. And one thing I hate is precedents. Somebody say, well, you're setting precedents. Well, somebody's got to set precedents. And if we're gonna say, you know, our people that work together so desire to help somebody else out, why would we stand in the way of that? To me, that's one of the greatest things I've heard come from this town in a long time. That here's somebody that doesn't even really work here very much yet, just started. These people are so moved by his situation and by possibly his work ethic, his personality, the fact that he wants to work in Monterey, plans on working in Monterey. Why would we say no to them?
Especially given it's a pretty bad situation, and I really feel for him. The people he works with are that willing to donate their own time to it. I see Sophia's point about, well, what if somebody else wasn't as lucky, but this is the question before us, and I think that,
I think we answer
what would it
questions
mean if
as
we
they come
didn't
to
do
us.
it, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we're all on board and I
I don't
certainly
know how to frame it.
entertain a motion. The other side is thinking forward, you know, and I don't think we need to do it, this is kind of an emergency, it's certainly time sensitive. Is what would a policy look like? And it sounds like there's some standards, like if you work for so long, then there can be a sick time bank. And we can hopefully work with Sophia to incorporate that right into the handbook, right?
I kinda liked her comment about, and don't ever say this twice, that I'm saying, I like the idea of having an insurance company.
Oh.
Because personally, my thoughts on insurance companies are pretty low. They set policy and then they don't abide by it.
Yeah.
However, in this case, that would take everybody off the hook. Somebody has to do this, and if we could write the policy so that it would fit regardless of how long they've worked, instead of saying you'd have to have worked for a year, maybe we could modify that down. So that, God forbid, if somebody who just walked through the door turns around and something happens, we know they're gonna work for us. And it's an insurance policy to cover that. Regardless of how we end up doing it in the future, I'm all for them banking their time to this individual. I'm not 100% certain how it would work, but I think that the treasurer may be able to figure that out.
The insurance policy or this particular?
Not the insurance, that's down the road, this particular instance.
Just to clarify, the insurance policy would only be if we decide to do the paid FMLA act, which we were not in support of when this first came up.
Well, we may be able to ask an insurance company, any company, no names named, to create a rider that would cover just this type of thing without getting masks involved and all of that. The less we keep the state involved, the better.
I think the
So
problem,
we do have an AFLAC policy that employees can join that does have a sick policy. And that's completely optional if they
Well,
want.
maybe we should get Mr. Affleck to come in and speak to everybody that would like to listen to what he says. Because when he came to my wife's job and made his spiel, numerous of us, we all gathered around and signed up for different specifics. And within 3 weeks, I ended up having triple bypass and I had like $700 a day given to me. that they lost immediately upon me signing, but I gained, and I was so thankful that that was there.
So they do usually come in December to see if any open enrollment to join. As for the other question, yes, I will, those of us that wanted to donate, I will collect how many days each of us wanted to give to him, and I will send it to the payroll company to adjust it.
So it would be payroll, not treasurer.
Yeah, treasurer handles payroll, but
Yeah.
her or I can handle this, doing it. in the
Times have
payroll.
changed, so.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's, and then going forward, we can talk about putting this, whether we want to adopt
Right.
paid FLMA, FMLA, or do the sick bank or something, or nothing, but we can have that discussion. But for right now, I would move that we permit some of our, some town employees
Any
to
town employee
donate.
that wants.
That wishes to.
Yeah, any town employee that wishes to donate sick time to this highway department member so that he can attend to a family emergency.
I second that,
Is there any other discussion or comment? Call vote,
Yes.
yes.
yes, unanimous, yes vote. And thank you, like Scott said and Sue said, to everyone willing to donate sick time.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, that's
an
what,
awesome
that's what
president.
makes small town.
It makes us like, it shows who we are when it
Yeah.
comes down to it.
I mean, it makes me feel good about town.
So the next item, Peter Marquette reached out and he's looking for full access to the energy data of the town of Monterey on the Mass Energy Insight energy reporting system.
I thought we had created that years ago, I'm sure.
It's just-
I'm not certain if they keep up with that.
When Peter asked for an account, they said this is the process he has to go through, right, Melissa? Yeah, so I would move that we authorize, Peter to have this information and sign the letter as it's drafted.
Second,
Is there any other discussion? There being none, we'll call a vote.
yes.
Yeah, man.
Yes, so that's 3 yeses, and Melissa has a clean copy to sign.
I'm impressed with the number of different ways Scott can say yes.
The next one is 6A, which is the lighting at the community center. So I've been in touch with Joe Baker a little bit, I think Susan may have been as well. There's the lighting coming from National Grid, but the question is, in the meanwhile, would it be possible to work temporary lighting into the equation? Do we have any kind of estimate on National Grid?
Do you have what I sent you? I don't have it in front of me.
Yes, I'm saying,
I see dollar values, but.
there were no dollar values.
No, there's no dollar values and there's no specific time frame right at the moment, but, I can tell you as far as temporary lighting, we have been unable to find any contractor that wants to touch this, so that's why we went to National Grid and proposed the,
Could I ask what you asked the local contractors to do?
I can show you the request for a proposal that was sent out.
Sure, that would be great.
Well, and short of doing, so if we make it under $10,000, I guess the point would be, is it wouldn't be pretty, but kind of like Joe said, we have wiring out to the two, they're like 4x4s.
So there's some outlets.
Yes. Well, there's 2 lights of different, that are very different colors. And pointing they don't cover everything. I guess the question would be, obviously, if we go to a high amount, we have to go through procurement. But could we follow best practice and hire an electrician for I'm not an electrician, so I can't quote it, but maybe $1,000 to wire over to another light just on the other side, or I don't know what putting a light on a tree would look like. But it's a shame where there is half decent lighting, it's not pretty, but there's half decent lighting, but there's huge blind spots where there is no lighting. And could it be as simple as, yes, we're not gonna do a $30,000 project to make it nice and pretty, but if National Grid's not coming till Do we know when National Grid's coming?
There is no date.
No date.
NG will have the local designer complete the layout and present it to us for review to ensure it meets our approval. They're envisioning 2 poles to reach the island, and then they should be able to place both new lights on that second pole facing opposite directions. They'll need an easement for the poles, so Jim and I will have to start working on gathering that information to help expedite the process. I'm not clear yet where the easements are needed.
How about we go the simple route, temporary, and get some solar lop-in
Just gonna
lamps?
ask about the solar option.
Because all we're trying to do is get a footpath, correct?
Plowing is the issue there.
Plowing?
Well, no, you're not gonna plow a footpath.
No, but this is,
Had this
so there's
Oh,
parking
okay.
spots up, if you enter and there's the cul-de-sac and you look up to the left, there's parking spots. And walking from that into the building, there's numerous blind spots and it's along that cul-de-sac, which is plowed. My question is, right now on top of those 4x4s, there's one light on each. Could we do something as simple as just point one, add one more light on,
To each.
I would imagine the wiring is
floodlight?
sufficient. Yeah, some kind of,
Right now, there's a floodlight of some
Yeah.
LED or incandescent.
one's yellow and one is like a cold blue.
But if that box, if it's a standard exterior electrical box, the top should be able to come off, and they have them with sensor, plug, and you would then put 2 plugs that are movable, whatever bulb you put in them is up to you, and you would gain one more light per stanchion.
That's what I would do. That's how I would start. I think that center one could have another one, whether or not to put one on a tree. And we know something more permanent is on the way, so it's temporary, but it's like to get us through the winter. I mean, now it's dark at what, 2 p.m.?
Don't you work for an electrician? Are you volunteering to?
No, I don't work for an electrician. I, back in the day, worked for someone, but I was not, and I've never worked for an electric company.
So
Also,
we have discussed all this, I'm not
Okay.
comfortable answering any of this without Jim here and going over
Okay.
my notes and everything, but we have discussed temporary measures, and again, we've reached out to electricians and nobody's willing to touch his job.
Also, I'm just gonna throw out there that my neighbors just installed solar, they're motion sensors solar, but they're up. They're not on, not the cute little ones like you put down here, but they're ones you can mount, they mounted theirs on the side of their garage and the side of their house. It's about like that big, but what if we had something like that we could mount right on the pole?
So we have discussed all this.
No, okay.
I would just rather, when I have my notes and I'm prepared,
Okay.
to know this was what was coming up.
But, yeah, okay,
Alright, so, but I think it's worth looking into, especially if we don't have a date on the National Grid.
cause it could
Just
be
to-
months and
just 'cause
it's darker
If
over now,
there's,
yeah,
They're not gonna move till spring.
it's gonna be a while, so let's get something up there.
and I understand why an electrician, I don't understand, because I'm not an electrician, but I could imagine why an electrician might not wanna do the whole project, but hey, can we pay you time and material to just
Add on.
add a noise? Not
I'll
rocket
run
science.
with that.
Yeah.
Got a few electricians that.
But I just want, I
Yeah.
wanna make sure that the funds, because the funds was for the whole lighting project, so I'm not sure that we would have the funds to do it the way, again, so that's why I didn't wanna comment on anything, because I wanna be able to look at all the conversations that we've had.
I'll get you a proposal from my electrician within a week and a half. I'll go up there after today, see what those 2 lights are all about, and see what my thoughts could be. And then I'll get the electrician that works with me closely to come out and to just give us his idea of how to get some additional lighting until Nat Grid can get themselves
And
online.
we don't have to act on it,
We don't
but
have
if we
to
have a
act on
proposal,
anything,
we'll
but
at
he'll
least
come
have one
out.
more thing to consider.
And at least give us the possibility of adding another flood to each of those lights, as simple as that.
Something like that. Alright,
I know there's something coming out, but I don't, I have to coax it.
Maybe I wasn't clear, I don't know that there is funds to pay for
Oh.
a temporary
Well-
solution.
well, what was,
Funding will take
So
place.
that's, I don't wanna discuss this now, because I'm not fully prepared
what was,
to answer the
but
question.
why would, no, we're not gonna discuss it, but
Wait a minute,
in the
is
research,
there any ARPA money left?
in the
Not unless we rescind one.
in the research, what, I mean, was the funding so specific that we can't for the lighting project. Do we know how much National Grid's gonna cost?
We kinda don't know
Does the
anything.
roof, does the,
If poles are going for 10,000 a pop, it could be 10,000 for the two
no,
poles.
that could be crazy money. My question is, what is funding the community center now?
The lighting,
No,
There-
what funds the community center?
Valley
Valley
Line.
And they're on, it's almost nothing, it's like 11,000 for
Mhm.
a year.
It's town property.
That's right,
They're holding to make certain that it's safe for its citizens.
I would agree with you.
Money's gotta come from somewhere.
I would agree with that
Whether it's a write-off from the finance committee allows it to be an expenditure.
Well,
We've got the possibility of liability against the town due to the fact that it's improperly lit. We ask citizens to come there as volunteers, to come and enjoy the community center, and it's not properly lit. Right now, we have one foot on a banana peel and another out the door. So I think that it's without any cost to the town to have this gentleman come out and look at what he could do, to present a small fee to give us a few more lights. Certainly doesn't put anybody on the spot,
I would agree.
other than me, for asking this guy to take time
Right,
to do it. So let's just see what his response is.
works for me.
yeah,
I mean, he may say, oh, I could do this, this, and this for the same amount as this and this.
Right.
It's just a matter of running it, and either it goes or it fails.
And if we don't like the proposal or we can't find a proposal, then we don't go for it.
okay.
We can always give out pets, so heck,
Yeah. Solar hats.
So minutes, there was some confusion.
Excuse me.
Basically, what I felt like I was tasked with doing was going over the minutes entirely, and they're kind of new minutes. So Melissa had asked, did I take into consideration comments? I started to do that, and then you just take them as new minutes, as unfortunate as that circumstance may be, because I ended up, like we said, summarizing them quite a bit more. So,
Can we have time to look over them then?
Yeah,
The
no.
first one I opened was 6 pages, so I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to tell if the changes.
don't, sorry, I don't mean, don't for today,
Okay.
try to approve anything.
Okay.
But for these minutes, just now, next meeting, we'll do the typical process for 10, 18, 19.
Starting
26.
with these.
So just take those and do the track changes like you've done, or don't do them, and we'll start next week. Fresh.
Okay.
Unanticipated business,
See Don's hanging out there, has he got something?
No, he just listens.
Comments and questions from the public, Eileen?
What?
Are
Got
there
anything
comments and
for us?
questions from the public?
Hello, goodbye.
Very well.
Is that it?
I'll be the same.
Well, if you have any comments and questions, other than
About
that.
anything?
Don't open up.
Okay.
You're begging for trouble.
Motion to adjourn,
I'm not the kind of person you wanna ask that question to.
I was just
yes,
saying.
yes, for
Yes.
adjourning.
Yes.
3 yeses, meeting adjourned at 1:50 PM.
Everyone survived.